Listeners of the Randomness of Nothing podcast, T.R.O.N, I want to give a special shout out to the guest that I have today. It's Mr. Mike Chamberland. And one thing I'm very honored with is he was ahead of the curve when it comes to cybersecurity and very successful at his IT career in the company that he created. This is going to be a very special episode because we ultimately are all affected by this digital transformation and there's no going back. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Rashad. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to discuss cybersecurity with you and a little bit of my story, how I got where I'm at, and see what we can learn.
I always find it funny because, people, at the beginning looked at movies like, that really good Will Smith movie, Enemy of the State. And you're like, oh, this really can't happen. Information really can't flow that freely. And here we are in 2026 and you start watching the movie like, well, dang,
Yeah,
it blows your mind.
It seems to be getting worse and worse over time. Things were bad, and the attackers are always improving their weapons, improving their techniques, and anytime we do something to prevent attacks, then there's new tools and new techniques, and
right.
And now with AI, it seems to be there's no stopping as to what's possible for attackers. It's actually AI and LLMs is making it even harder to secure system now. And just because of all the value LLMs and AI is bringing, everybody's rushing to implement them. So we're seeing all kinds of very interesting things in that space.
So your company IntegSec, and I always find it funny when people are ahead of the curve of what's the norm, right? So, when people are first putting out, CDs when, what is this? Or when people first, or perfect examples like Netflix, when Netflix came out, you're like, I'm not going to order a DVD by mail. And then all of a sudden it became the norm, right? So you're in IT when it's not the forefront of regular everyday lives. What were those early days like when you first got into IT?
Yeah, for me, it was just a passion. I started really young. When I was in school, actually, elementary school is really when I developed that passion for computers.
Yeah.
When I was in elementary school in Canada, they had 86. Actually, that was in high school. In the elementary school, they had Apple II computer.
And had
this. Nice. And they had this logo writer programming language. Not sure if you're familiar with that. You had a little turtle and you move the turtle around and and whatnot. So that's really where I really got hooked on moving that turtle around. When I started writing code, this was for me.
Beautiful.
So I grew up pretty poor. So my family, we didn't have our own computers, but friends and whatnot, they had Commodores and they had like basic computers.
Right.
Anytime I found myself at somebody's house, they liked playing video games. We had the Ninja games back then on floppies and whatnot.
Yeah.
I would just like to sit at the command line and figure out what I can do with that computer. And, that was always my passion. In high school, it got a little bit more involved. The screen now had 16 color instead of 4. And again, I had a class. We got some programming. I was actually fortunate enough to have an advanced math class in high school.
Awesome.
And we're able to use that with the programming class to create like very primitive 3D games.
Yeah.
So that's really where I got the bite for computers. And when I was, I think, 14 or 15, I got my first own computer. Yeah. It was a 46 DX250 and with a 2400 baud modem. And that's really where the real passion for cybersecurity started. I started, using bulletin board system, dialing up to the internet. The internet was different back then. You had to dial up and PPP and all the text-based protocol, Gopher, and back then there was no such thing really as hacking. People would push systems to their limits and make things do what they shouldn't. And I love learning about that. I learning about programming language like C++ and assembly and write video games.
Beautiful.
Linux was also around that time came about.
And for the people who don't know what that is, for the people who don't know what that is, it's funny because Linux came from Unix, right? And so, that's the precursor to Windows. It looks very similar, but it has the kernel, right? That it's very secure too, as well.
Yeah, it's a very flexible and powerful operating system.
Right.
So by default, it does have some pretty good security feature. Like any operating system, you can configure it in the wrong way.
Right.
And then it's not going to be very secure. But you're right. It has a lot of built-in security tools. We also use it a lot in our penetration testing
Yes.
just because it's so powerful and
Yes.
flexible. But yeah, back then I even created my own Linux distribution that was for penetration testing.
Yeah.
That was back in the days you would have to create all the different floppies to install it. You download it over your
Yeah.
modem. It would take forever. And then you would, make all the stack of floppies and install everything.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to learn everything before my first job in the industry.
Absolutely. That's amazing. You know what else is fascinating too is that when you were talking about the security systems and all those other things involved, the first thing that I thought about was the movie War Games with Matthew Broderick, right? And for people who don't know, that movie was so ahead of the curve. He's a teenager tinkering in his room, and then eventually he almost started World War III, right? And then he gets, I haven't seen the movie in quite some time, but the trivia about that film is it was so powerful. The federal government, at the time, President Ronald Reagan actually made sure that, it changed cybersecurity, that they actually created a division inside the government to protect against things like that because it was so realistic of what could take place. Right. And you're like, this wasn't some foreign alien species that was coming out of space. You're like, yeah, this computer can do this, and some 18-year-old whiz kid can, bring you on the brink of a very bad situation.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate truth. One of the thing that is concerning, I guess, is that it's, for the defenders, if you have business, you have to basically be successful every time. You have to prevent every breach. You have to block every hole, which is pretty much impossible. But when you're an attacker, you just have to find one way in to get to your goal. So it makes it a very challenging thing for the government. The government been very much struggling to secure their system, as we've seen on the news. And it's a long war that we have to keep fighting for quite a while.
Right, and that's the fascinating part. They only have to get right once, and then they use tactics. I took an IBM certificate, cybersecurity course, and the tactics is called brute force, right? Where essentially,
that's right.
It's almost like in the movies when they just keep hitting you and hitting you and hitting you and hoping that eventually a blow lands, right? They don't have actually a specific tactic, but if you just hit something hard enough, eventually something will break, right?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. There's no system that's completely secure, because if there was a way to do that, then big organizations like Google and Microsoft, they would have built the secure system. There's just no way to do it. And even when you look at penetration testing, right, you might test something and say, okay, we found these things, we fixed it. It's not over. You have to keep doing it over and over, because the techniques change, the tooling change, the people looking at it change, which makes it different because people have different background. They might notice something that they won't. And then there's just no way to find every single issue. There's no technique or tools or anything we can do to find every single issue. So that's why it's important to keep doing testing on an ongoing basis to identify all these issues.
And well, the key too is that crime has evolved now, right? So before, they have organizations in that are very, very well funded, talented people. They have computer, science people who do criminal activity here, and it's what so that they're taking people who are highly qualified, highly tech savvy, who know how to hack systems and hold things hostages, like they did, that one pipeline or nuclear company that was in either, I don't want to,
in Iran.
No, yeah, it was a U.S. state. It was a company over in the States. I forgot to get held hostage because they turned off their nuclear system or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember what year.
Ransomware.
Yeah, yes. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is real.
Yep.
So, and now companies are, who are behind the eight ball or who have that antiquated security system are all vulnerable.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to advanced persistent threats like you describe, it's really, really hard to protect from them. You got to invest a lot of money. Essentially, it's a money game, right? The more you spend on something, the deeper you can get into it, the more likely you're going to be able to find something to break it. So those people with large budgets, they're definitely able to look at a lot and find issues. So you kind of have to match that budget or outdo it somehow to find the issues before the bad guys do.
Right.
And I was just going to say, typically, most organizations are still pretty immature in their vulnerability management program. Some of them don't even do penetration testing.
Right.
They're only relying on scan or do nothing. But that's terrible. Penetration testing at least help the organization identify issues that are truly exploitable, because
Right.
most businesses are dealing with an avalanche of vulnerabilities and they don't know, what should I tackle? I have 1,000 things that are broke. The pen test really helps you laser focus on what is important to your business, because everything is confirm exploitable. It's not just a theory. It
Right.
is exploitable. There's an example on how, and it's also prioritized on the level of damage it can do to your business. But for the advanced persistent threat, you got to take it even further than that. You have to have a mature pen test program, and you also have to be doing adversary simulation and red teaming. And that's where we can actually emulate those groups with more advanced technique. And you only would consider that once you already have a pretty mature security program, test it out and fine tune it, essentially.
Isn't it amazing that you actually have to pretend that you can break into your own system, right? Like, and that's asked some tough questions about your security, your system, because now with so much digital information, the lawsuits and the potential liabilities of a company is very high. And this is
Yeah,
hitting the
absolutely.
largest of firms and companies, and they can pay, they don't want to pay the fine. It could obliterate a small business.
Absolutely. Yep. The cost of losing all your customers' data and your reputation can really shut your business down overnight.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
absolutely.
So spending on security it's one of these things that you're going to spend on it regardless. You're going to either spend on it up front and prevent things from happening, or you're going to spend on it later and you'll be reactive after the breach, figuring out, how do we contain this? How do we recover from this? So it's always, it's counterintuitive, but it always makes more sense to spend on the security up front and avoid the things that are never going to happen if you do the right thing up front.
I have to imagine that the person that was screaming at the top of the mountaintop that we should do this was, and they're talking to the sales guy and they're basically telling him to be quiet and stop talking about cybersecurity. We need to make and manufacture the product. And then something hits the headline about something that's hacked, and then they call that guy up and they call you and your company and they're like, yeah, we need to invest in this pretty quickly because we don't want the roof to fall off.
Yeah, it does happen actually more than it should. People wait till they're breached and then they want to find out how did they get in.
Right.
A lot of the time too, when it comes to breach, you have to have an incident response plan in place, right? You have to exercise it. You have to know what to do. And a lot of these companies don't even have any plan. They're also not logging enough information. So when it comes to, they reach out to an organization to help them with the incident, and then they start looking and there's no log. They don't have enough information to actually figure out what actually happened. And that's often when we come in as pen testers and we know they broke through here, but we don't know exactly how they did it. We want to find out and fix it. So we come in and test that area, and we find usually plenty of issues, including more than what would be necessary to get into the environment, and then they're able to fix it. And then obviously after learning the hard way, implementing, the proper monitoring, having the right people lined up for incident, how to contain things and all that is put in place. But unfortunately, it's often after the fact as opposed to being up front.
Well, the other thing about it is how voluntarily people give over their information now with this digital world, right? Nobody would willingly post their social security number, in a window in their driveway, but people will input their information in Chat GPT, which you don't know who's looking at the information. It's not There's a difference between looking up, how great was Tom Brady versus, tell me about all my medical information, et cetera, and then that information's willingly out there.
Yep. Once you hit send on something and it goes online, there's no guarantee you're ever going to be able to take it back out. And that's the problem, is if you're feeding your data to LLMs, you don't know where it's going. Is it going to be used for training in the future?
Right.
And if it is used in training, that means there's a possibility that somebody will eventually pull your data that was used in the training. So there's a way to work with LLM and tell them, I don't want you to use my data for training, and that's good. There's definitely settings you can use to make that more responsible use, but absolutely, people are sharing way too much online on social media and LLMs, and it's making the attacker's life easier.
The golden rule about it, is if it's free, you're not the customer, you're the product being sold, right?
That's
So
right. Yeah.
I always find it fascinating for people who took nonlinear paths to their career. So what was like when you formed your own company?
It's been a wild ride because you have to wear so many hats.
Mhm.
My background has been very technical. I was part of startup, like I was the third employee at a company called EPS Financial, and we launched a whole business in a summer essentially. I think the investment was about 3 million. We were able to turn it into a 17 million revenue in the
That's what
first
I figured.
year. Yeah, it was awesome. Great experience. Building data center, building the software, building the team and everything.
Mhm.
It was a great experience and a learning experience. Now, I forgot your original question.
I just know it just was like, well, my first question was, what was it like being an early adopter, and then it was just starting your own business. So that was
Yeah.
more than a sufficient enough answer.
So yeah, starting my own business was, I've learned a lot over the years. I know I love building teams. I love building programs. What's been new to me and what I've been learning a lot about is marketing, the marketing side of things. So that's been a very different things that I'm not an expert in. So that's been very nice to learn about. I'm also not
Sure.
an accounting expert, and I'm getting much better at learning accounting now. We
No
have a
doubt.
CPA, but it's still very important to know the numbers and how things
Yeah,
are doing. So
absolutely.
learning a lot in that area. And you have to wear multiple hats and do whatever needs to get done to get the business to continue moving. So it's been a very rewarding and also challenging experience. And we're still a startup, so it's still a lot of work to do to continue growing our business.
I think the important, where do you service your clients? Like, can you service anybody? Obviously, we're digital, right? So, where does your
Yep.
primary base, and what size of customer do you typically service?
Yeah, so we can really service any countries that the US is allowed to do business with.
Fantastic.
Majority is the US by far, and a few Canadian company, and once in a while we got a company from outside these
Right.
two regions. And what's the second part?
No, no, I just was curious. I said, hey, who do you typically service, and what size of business is it?
Oh
Right?
yeah, the
Like,
size of business.
yeah,
So there's different markets in the pen test world. The smaller business, they like the compliance pen test, smaller
yeah.
pen tests that they use for their, either SOC 2 compliance,
Mhm.
ISO compliance, or other compliance, PCI compliance. And that tends to be the smaller organization. And larger organization are looking for pen test as a service, more of an ongoing support
Right.
and testing. When, the larger organization has a lot of things to test. So when it comes to pen testing, right, there's many different types of tests and there's different sizes. There's web application pen tests where you test the application and the API. There's network pen tests, and even within that, there's different types. There's external network where you test from the internet,
Oh my goodness.
internal network where you test on the inside in Active Directory or in the
Yeah.
cloud. There's mobile application pen tests because they're very different. Yeah,
Yeah.
mobile applications are very different than a web application when it comes to
Yes, they
testing
are.
for
Yes,
security.
they are.
So there's different tests for that, and there's cloud tests. There's
React
even
Native
hard.
and things like that.
What's that?
Like React Native and things like that. So you have to go inside those deep dive things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's on all the application pen tests is when we look at application. We test both on the server and the client side. There's some
Right.
things that we have to look on the server side, some things on the client side.
Yeah.
And yeah, all these tests have different sizes too. You can test something for a week, you can test it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And the size of the test doesn't change really what you're looking for. You're always looking for the same things, but there's some things that you have to look throughout the target to be able to identify. And there's some things you test once. So for example, is the SSL or TLS to your website configured correctly? We
Yes.
look at that once and we're done, no matter what the size of the test is. But things like SQL injection and cross-site scripting requires us to look throughout the application, not just in one spot, but throughout it. And that's why the different size of tests matter. The bigger tests will give you more coverage of these things that requires us to look throughout the whole target to find them.
Yeah, and for people who are business owners, it's not, let's say you own, a clothing store, or you own, a small computer shop, and you have valuable merchandise that can be easily walked out with. It's not the person that's walking down the street, with the hoodie and the weapon in their hand that could hurt you. It's the person behind the computer or the organization that you'll never see, that has no face, that doesn't leave a digital footprint, that will do the most damage to you.
They can do a lot of damage really quick without you seeing them.
Without you seeing
financial damage, absolutely.
Right. And so I think that, having that threat and a service such as yours to protect them is tantamount. And, again, it's in case people are, blind right now, the genie's out of the bottle to the digital transformation that takes place. And you owe it as a business, if only to be kind of dragged to the table. You have to do this now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no way around it.
Yeah,
you're gonna get hacked. You're either gonna get hacked by the good guys or the bad guys, and it's cheaper. It's much cheaper to get hacked by the good guys than the bad guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always ask every guest this because I think that we need to do a multi-part series about this, because I would love that with you and your team and company, because I think that this topic is not worthy of the small discussion that we're having now. And there's so many different layers of this, and we can go down a kind of a tech talk about this. And if you want, we can do that.
I would love to do that. We can bring some friends from the team as well, and have a more comprehensive conversation as well.
I would. I think this would be great for the audience. But for the purpose of this show, where can people find you?
The easiest way is just IntegSec.com. Go to our website, and you can get a bunch of information about the different services we have on there. And it's easy to schedule a call. Top right corner, let's talk button. Just schedule a call. We'll get on the phone and discuss your need and see how we can help.
I would absolutely be honored, sir, and to be on another call about this. And I'm glad you're sharing your services. And again, the funny fact about myself is that when you talk about hacking, I remember I got an email one time that, your Netflix could be compromised, from bad overseas actors. I honestly just deleted that email. And then one day I was trying to control my Fire Stick, and then the cursor kept moving and it kept moving. I was like, is this the same? I said, it was for real. It was all these bad. And as soon as I changed my password, it stopped moving on my TV. They hacked my TV. They hacked my Fire Stick. I was blown away.
Yep. Yeah. And actually, that's what's getting scary, right? Because everything's going online, medical, cars, your fridge.
Yeah.
So everything. And now we're putting AI into everything. And AI, we used to say we have to have layers of security when it comes to network and application, because if one fails, the other is going to have you. But with AI, it's a little bit different now. We have to have layers of security, and if any of them fail, then you're in trouble. So it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
The fact that everything is connected now, and also that we're plugging AI into it, it just makes it a lot more dangerous place for all of us, unfortunately.
Without question. Mike Chamberlain, like I said, we got to have a follow-up talk. And, I'd love to talk to members of your team, and I can't wait to hear more about the success of IntegSec. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thanks for your time today, and looking forward to talking again.
Thanks, sir.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.